Let's go to Mark chapter 11, beginning in verse 12. It says, the next day they were leaving Bethany, and Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone carrying any merchandise through the temple courts. And he taught them. He said, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have made it a den of robbers. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from its roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Have faith in God, Jesus answered. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, ask whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive your sins. The title of the sermon today is, God Expects Fruit, Not Religious Nuts. You know, you'll remember a couple of weeks ago, we introduced you to Mark's storytelling type of pattern, that he used a chiastic style, which means that he sets things up in layers, each one mirroring one another, but showing you the importance, and the thing in the middle is the most important. Well, Mark, once again, is doing that, except instead of a full-on sandwich, this is more like a fig sandwich. You know, that in between the two stories of the figs comes the heart of how we're supposed to interpret what Jesus is doing. Because I don't know about you, but this seems like a pretty harsh judgment on Jesus' part. You know, we see him at the very beginning, you know, looking at a fig tree that was in leaf. That was not uncommon. Fig trees tend to stay in leaf. And when he went to find fruit on it, he went to find out if it had any fruit on it, which was kind of a, why would you go to find fruit if you knew that it was not the season for fruit? And because he found nothing on it but leaves, he says, you know, you're cursed. May no one ever eat fruit from you again. But the problem is, it was not even the time for figs. It wasn't the tree's fault, right? And you got to know that anytime a detail like this is pointed out to you, in the Gospels or in a letter, something that seems kind of odd or like overly obvious, you know the author has got something more in mind. You're not to sit back and wonder, are we supposed to curse things that aren't in season? You know, the fig tree was just doing what fig trees do, but now Jesus blasts this thing and it withers. Is that right? And of course, all Jesus is doing is, instead of telling us a parable, he's acting out a parable. Because fig trees, especially in that environment, are always going to be in leaf. Very rarely do the leaves fall off of this amazing plant. Very rarely do you ever see a fig leaf or a fig tree that is just barren and desolate. If it is, it's probably sick and dying anyway. But most of the time, when you're over there in the Middle East and you see fig trees, this is what you see. Incredible bushy things. This is the kind of tree in a desert you would want to have around because you will always have shelter. It is, I guarantee you, it is 20 degrees cooler underneath that tree than standing beside that tree. But what Jesus was looking for was this. Figs. In season, ripe. Of course, it wasn't time for figs. The tree is always in leaf, but it's time to bear fruit, isn't? And so when Jesus curses it, he was trying to accomplish something more. He was trying to telegraph something we need to hear, trying to point us in a direction that we need to pay attention to. There was something more at stake. Here in Jeremiah 17, we see what Jesus may have had in mind as he starts to tell us this story. He's literally saying this is what someone who puts their faith in God is like. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. It doesn't fear when heat comes. Which means in your life, the heat's going to come. It's not a matter of if. Just a matter of when. You're doing good in your life right now. Things are clicking for you. You're not even sure if you need God or not. It's just a matter of when. Trust me, we'll be here when you realize that. You struggling right now and you're not sure if you can hang on any longer. You're kind of here. You're here because someone dragged you. And you're not even sure if it's even worth the effort. Heat's come. It's here. It's on you. But here, even in the old prophets, God had a story to tell. That there will come a time when people will simply walk with Him, and when they do, they will be like a tree that sends out its roots into the stream. It doesn't fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worry in the year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. See, Jesus is pointing Israel out to something. Remember, his meeting there was not a secret. They have had the triumphal entry. They had sung Hosanna to Jesus himself. They had called him the Son of David. He had started to flex this reality of who he was and started to let everyone know the King has come. He even came in riding on a donkey. Not a war horse, because a war horse would symbolize something that had to be taken. He came in riding on a donkey because that means I don't have to try to take what's already mine. He rolled into that city not as one that needed to flex muscle and take it over, because in his mind it was already his. But as he went into that city, there was a problem. There was something that seemed to be full of busyness, full of life, full of energy, but had no fruit. To which the prophet Jeremiah, which he was about to quote for us, would be pointing everyone to. Our text in Mark goes on to say, he taught them and said, "Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations?" This is quoted right out of Isaiah 56. It's such an encouraging passage. It is literally the time when Isaiah has said, okay, punishment is over. Israel, you now see the consequences of sin, but let me show you the fruit of redemption. And Isaiah starts to paint this amazing portrait. He paints this interesting sign that there would be a suffering servant that would come and die for the sins of many. But when he does, the fruit of that would become this incredible outreach. This incredible reality that where God dwells will be a house of prayer for the nations. Israel knew they only had one job to do. And that was to be a light to the Gentiles. They knew they only had one role to play. And that was to go out and show God to a world that didn't know him. God said, I don't even need a lot of land. I just need this sorry little tract of land that is literally at the crossroads of the trade route of the world. It connected the north to the south. It connected to Egypt, to Babylon and Syria. It was the place that all commerce rolled through on sea and land. God said, I just need this little sorry nation. From there, the world will know that there is a God that's greater than all the gods that try to lay claim to this terrestrial plane. In my house, where I live, it's going to be a house of prayer for the nations. But that nation turned it into a den of robbers, which is Jeremiah chapter 7. And Jesus, being a fantastic teacher, does what teachers in his day did a lot. They took obscure scriptures from one part of an Old Testament book and another scripture from another part of the Old Testament book and brought those together and said, see what God is trying to tell you? In this incredible moment of redemption and planning of God, there you have a problem because that redemption plan has been turned into something exactly opposite of what it was supposed to be. Isaiah 56, Jeremiah 7 had never been put together before. And so this house of prayer is now being ran like a squad of terrorists. This is actually from the movie Den of Thieves. I just thought, hey, it's biblical. But I don't want us to think of this as simply a commentary on commercialism. Because I think a lot of times when we read this passage, we just think, see how greedy we are? Yes, we're very greedy. We shouldn't make church about greed. How lame is that? How off the mark is that? When Jesus said those words, in their mind, they would not have been thinking of a bunch of guys trying to make a quick buck by carjacking some people. They were literally thinking of thieves and robbers in the terms of, this is a brigade of people willing to use any means necessary to try to right the wrongs of this world. They were ones that were called zealots. They were ones that were called rebellions. They were plotters and planners ready to take on Rome and ready to take down Jerusalem with it if Rome were to win. They were mercenaries. And here what Jesus is saying is that you've taken something that God had meant for the entire world to experience, but instead you've made it exclusive. You've made it difficult. You've made it hard-hearted towards the world out there and very focused on just you in here. My house was meant to be for the nations, but you only have one thing on your mind, and that's your nation. And instead of being one that goes and tries to give the world God, you're trying to convince God that He needs to give the world to you. And so He basically calls the authority, you bunch of terrorists. You are stealing God's plan. You are sabotaging God's program by making this idea of sacrifice as the only way to get to God. And you think, well, how does Jesus feel about that? Well, I do love that song, My Lord Heard Jerusalem. I like that song, not because I fully understand what all the words mean, but because in the middle you get to go, well. I just think this is one of those moments where you start to recalibrate. I mean, if you don't know Jesus very well, get this picture in your mind. Because the one you've probably been fed is him holding a little sheep. And he has like this little hand thing here. And he's looking up to heaven, and he's white and blue-eyed. I don't know why. I apologize on behalf of all white people. And he's always looking up this, and people have asked me, you're a teacher, why do they always have their fingers like that? And I'm like, because they're about to drop the deuce. That's why. No. But the picture that the Scripture gives us of Jesus is arresting. He goes through and starts to wreck not just people that are exchanging for money. He's literally saying, I am bringing this whole system to a halt. The sacrificial system was just to break your heart before you went before the throne. And you've made it hoops on top of hoops that people have to jump through in order to get there. Nobody can bring an offering. They have to buy one. Why? Because it was never perfect enough. No. Don't even try to bring an offering of yours because it needs to be perfect. So you have to come and do it our way and give us your money so we can do it our way so that God will accept it. To which Jesus is like, wow! No! I think as a church, we just need to say that together. No! And you need to say that to yourself every time you catch yourself in a heap load of sin and you're thinking, what do I got to do to rescue myself? What do I need to do now in order to get right with God? Oh no, I've been stinking it up. I haven't been sharing, haven't been praying, haven't been doing anything for God. And now I feel guilty and I feel bad. Oh, I need to work it up. I need to psych. Come on, you can do it. Get out there and go. And you just psych yourself up. No. His house is a house of prayer for who? The nations. Who are the nations? The pagans. How much formality do they really need? Jesus would show us, wouldn't he? When he went to the cross and said there, it's finished. What sacrifice do you need to bring now? It's already been given. What you need to do now is to bring your sin out and say, I'm not trying to put something out before you, God, to cover me. I'm putting every reason out in front of me, God, so that you know that I know this is why I should go to hell in a handbasket. But because of that guy, I say no to the temptation to make religion about what I can do. And start to recognize it's about who you are and who I am to you. We picked the text back up in Mark chapter 11 somewhere. In the morning as they went along, they saw a fig tree withered from its roots. I think what's hilarious about this is that Peter at this point is still surprised. Rabbi! The fig tree you cursed is like dead! I mean, this is a guy who walked on water? This is a guy who saw Jesus drive out demons? This is a guy who was in the boat going, don't you care if we drowned? And Jesus said, I said it. And the whole sky and the sea went calm. How is he still surprised? Wow! You cursed the plant and it died! I know we give the disciples a hard time, but Peter actually gets it. He's shocked because he understood what that must mean. The fig tree, if that dies, and it symbolizes the temple and its system, and all that we've known so far about what it means to come to you, what do? It's withered from the roots. This is all they knew. This glorious building, this glorious temple was all they knew. It came with an incredible beginning. You know, when Solomon dedicated that first temple that was built, when he was there praying to heaven for God to accept his house on earth, this is what Solomon said, "But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heavens, cannot contain you, much less this temple I've built." But in response, God poured down his fire that day. Could you imagine being there as Solomon, who's built this amazing palace, is dedicating the temple, and then God pours out his holy fire into that place, and it overwhelms everyone. And you start to go, man, it would have been awesome if I could do that. But this is only the first time that God poured out his fire into his temple. You want to know when he did it again? Okay, good. Thank you. Bonus points. Acts chapter 2. Outside of the temple. On the day of Pentecost, as they were coming up the steps, Peter and the guys who had just been together praying are all of a sudden receiving this outpouring of fire, not on the altar, not in the temple, but in this new temple of themselves. And they started preaching and proclaiming in languages we all knew that they didn't speak, but everyone else did. The nations were there, which is so cool. You kind of go, well, when did the church arrive at? You just pick a place and you go, it all started on the same day for you, for me. It all started on that day in Jerusalem because every nation was there. And then the invitation was, oh, this promise isn't just for us. It's for you and your children. It's for you who are far off. Yeah, you people in Oak Park in 2018. It's for you. I'm pouring it out. I'm continually pouring it out. It is in you. It is in me. And all we have to do is remember who we are. A house of prayer for the nations. So let's bring this home. What's needed is for us to get comfortable with the idea that fruit always follows prayer. So if you're worried about, oh, am I fruitful or not? Am I a fig tree about to get cursed? You've misunderstood the story completely. The question is, how do I join in that house of prayer movement? Fruit is a guarantee. But fruit always follows prayer. Prayer based on faith. Have faith in God. Trust that it's not about you, but it's all about Him. When you pray, you need to know that prayer is going to overcome the insurmountable odds. I know we love that idea of you can tell this mountain to go throw itself in the sea. You know, I need a faith that moves mountains. That is a misapplication, and I'm sorry that that's become a part of our Christianity. He's only talking about one mountain, and that's Mount Zion. You know, the one the temple was standing on? He's saying this whole system, with its job to do, is going to join the demons that went into the sea. It's going to join those that lead small ones into sin in the sea. It's the thing that's got a millstone tied around its neck. It's going to the sea. And if you want to be set free from that, if you want to walk with Jesus truly, you just need to tell that mountain, that part of you that says, I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough, I can't win, I'm not going to make it, this will never happen, I can't do it, I'm too young, I'm too old, I can't get fired up again, I've sinned too much. You need to tell those mountains, which is some system you believed in, and you didn't tell it to go into the sea. Why? Because prayer has got to be sustained by grace. It's all about grace. I remember praying with an evangelist when I was a young Christian, and I was so troubled by him because he always started off his prayers the same. Jesus, without you, I would never be heard. Jesus, you're the only reason why I have any connection to God. And as a young Christian, I was like, I mean, look at you. You're a preacher. You read your Bible. You're all God always listens to you. But he was so right. And it's just that reminder, Father, I have no connection with you except by grace seen through Christ. Because prayer has to be based on faith. It's got to be one that believes it's going to overcome obstacles. It's one that that it overcomes obstacles because I can only pray because of grace. Therefore, I need to have grace flowing out of me. He ends this whole little teaching with this idea of you have to be a person of forgiveness. You know, people went to the temple to get forgiven, assuming that by going to some arbitrary building, it would make up for everything they were doing wrong at home. Jesus goes, no, that's going into the sea. I need you to go at home and be a person of forgiveness here. Don't let church fool you into thinking that you're doing all right because you went to it. You need to go and be a man or woman of God. You need to be a person that pours out forgiveness, especially when it's not deserved. You need to give your heart completely to that, because if you're going to be a part of prayer that actually moves things, that changes things, then forgiveness is really the only thing on our end that we need to work on and can do. But you can only do that when you're in touch with the amount of grace God has poured into you. So, it's not like you're really doing much at all, is it? Which is the point. Our prayers need to move mountains. Based off faith that overcomes obstacles. That are sustained by grace. And are characterized by forgiveness. Last thought. I think when there's not a lot of fruit, there's very little prayer. I think that's kind of a simple, I don't think that's overanalyzing or underanalyzing or minimizing anything. I just think when there's not a lot of fruit, there's just not a lot of prayer. And when there's not a lot of prayer, there's just a lot of pride. And I don't know about you, but when I read this about Christ, it makes me want to be a man of prayer. Because I'm tired of living off pride. I'm tired of trying to manufacture spirituality. I'm tired of you getting frustrated because you're trying to manufacture something that isn't even in you to manufacture. So let's go through it again. Where there's little fruit, there's usually little prayer. And when there's little prayer, there's a lot of pride. Brothers and sisters, join me in repenting of this sin. Join me in repenting of this sin. And let's watch God open up the doors to the house of prayer for the nations.